Hi, it's Stephen at Goodie, and welcome to the first episode of Will It Cake. And today I'm making giant TWIX cake, which you can see is just a giant blown-up version of a TWIX bar. So it's a recipe that I was inspired by Yolanda at How to Cake It. She does all kinds of amazing stuff like this, and we're probably going to do about 20 episodes between now and when we launch our television show in the fall. So here we are. We started with some butter, room temperature butter, mixing it up to cream it, adding some sugar, and that's sort of at a medium-high speed on the mixer. Now adding some flour. And we just mix that up enough to incorporate it. We don't want to over-mix this. And scooping it into your pan. 9 by 13 inch pan is what I'm using. And I put some Pam on the pan to help the parchment paper stick to the edge. So you have a nice smooth edge. And now patting that down with my fingers. And then I'm going to take a spatula and go across the top to make it as smooth as possible on the top of that shortbread. So this will become the first layer of our TWIX cake. Now I notice in the next shot there are little marks made by a fork. So you take a fork and kind of stab it all over to help release air when it's baking. And what I'm doing here is marking out our rectangles. So each rectangle for the TWIX cake is 2.5 inches by 12 inches. And actually I make it a little shorter. I don't make it quite 12, but it doesn't really matter. So there it is in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. Now it's time to trim all the edges off. It's very easy to cut, as you can see. Okay. And what's really nice about this is you do end up with a fair amount left over. You're making very specific sizes and shapes for your cake, and you have to eat whatever's left over. So sorry about that. The shortbread is delicious. I was shocked. I've never made shortbread before, and I was really sort of amazed by how good it actually is. And there we go. So now we have cleaned up all around the our rectangle, and we're going to cut the pieces. So those little guidelines, we put those in before it baked, and you can still see them after you bake it. It's a really good idea. So once we get these all cut out, we're going to set them aside and melt some chocolate that we can use as a base. So we're going to melt at 30-second intervals in the microwave. And we'll stir that all up. I think it took about 2 minutes to get to this point. Oh, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? So spreading that out on a pan. Ooey gooey chocolate goodness. Yum. Now we place our shortbread rectangles on the chocolate and pop it in the fridge for maybe 20 minutes, and then you can trim the extra chocolate off all around the edge. You can leave it in the fridge longer, but it does make the chocolate a little harder to cut. Nice, perfect. Next up, we're going to make the cake portion. So that's the second layer in your Twix cake. Now, something to confess here. I'm making a pound cake here, but I found what Yolanda does is makes a vanilla cake that she uses for everything when she's sculpting cakes. I'm in our recipe section in the description of the video. I'm giving her recipe for her vanilla cake because it's much nicer to trim the top off, to level the cake with her cake. It's doable with the pound cake, but it's not as easy. It doesn't leave a smooth an edge when you cut it. So I'm not even going to really talk about what we're doing here because it's not what you're going to be doing. I've got to mention, actually, between Yolanda's recipe and my recipe, it's actually better than both of us separately. So I do a better caramel than she does, and she definitely does a better cake than I do. So you benefit from both of us, and you're going to do something that's even better. It's still pretty similar. We're making a basic cake, so just the recipe is a little different for hers than for mine. So trying to sift in the flour, shooting it off the edge of the sifter, as I usually do. Mix, mix, mix. Again, you don't want to over mix it. Same pan, same parchment paper, also some Pam, or you could use butter just to rub it all around the outside of the pan. How beautiful is that? Look at that. Again, smoothing it out to make it as smooth as possible. And in the oven it goes. I guess we could have put the same marks we put on the shortbread, but she doesn't do it, so I just stupidly follow her. Whatever she does, I do. But she didn't make any marks, but I guess you probably could, and I think it would still show. I'm not sure. I've never tried it before. But you might want to give it a go. The only thing is I think it might be a little gooier, the dough, so it might be a little bit harder to put a ruler on it and make your marks. But this is easy enough. So that making it the same size, we're going to cut out, we really just need 2 rectangles that are 2.5 inches by 12, or whatever length you're using. Once you kind of layer them, you can trim it, so it doesn't have to be 12 inches. And that's very easy to cut. Okay. So I'm taking some, this is corn syrup, and just kind of dabbing it on. If you try to spread it, it's going to grab all the crumbs on the shortbread. So dabbing a little bit more than brushing. And then we place our cake layers on top. I actually lost a video, so there's a section is missing here. But you place the cake layers on top, and here I am kind of trimming the ends so to make them nice and sharp and even. Oh, okay. Now with a serrated knife, I'm leveling the cake. So it wasn't that high. The pound cake didn't end up it didn't rise that much. But it did go up more in the middle, so I want to try to flatten it out as much as possible so it doesn't have like a hilly shape in the center. So you can see it's doable here with this type of cake, but it works much better with her cake. So when I take this off, it looks okay. If you can see it in real life, you would appreciate it's not as neat and tidy as it could be. So it's a little bit lumpier on the top. Now, this is where things are amazing. We're making the caramel. And this is where we do better here than Yolanda does. She makes the caramel out of caramels with some cream. It's way too soft and runny and spreads too much. This is just taking sugar. It's a chewy caramel. And this is a recipe from Cupcake Gemma. So all I did, heat that sugar up in the pan on medium heat. And also missing another video clip here. Should have shown it turning to a beautiful amber color. Once it turns amber, take it off the heat, start adding your cream, and look at this steam up. It's a violent reaction. Look at that. It's a little scary. So I've warned before, if you're making caramel, please don't let any kids be around while you're making it because it is kind of dangerous. It's really, really super hot, and if it gets on you, it will burn you, but it also sticks to your skin. So I had this happen. I had a part-time job at a popcorn factory once, and we were making caramel corn, and I got some on the inside of my arm, and the scar stayed there for years. It was just a blob that I couldn't get off. I had to, anyway, I won't go in. It was a little gruesome. But just be really, really careful. And look at that. Now, to get to that point, we added the cream and the butter, heated it up with a candy thermometer in there. You want to achieve 245 degrees Fahrenheit. No higher, no lower. Once you hit that, you're ready to pour it onto your tray. Not using parchment paper here, just a metal tray. Spreading that beautiful caramel out. Again, Cupcake Gemma makes 3 different types of caramel. There's a very liquidy caramel that you'd pour over things. This is the chewy caramel that's used in candies. And then there's a very brittle caramel that you use in brittle. So here we are cutting this out. We need those same 2.5 by 12 inch rectangles. And setting that aside to chew on later. Okay, cleaning that up. Look at this. Now we should have cut the camera here because I tried to separate it and it gets stuck on one side. So I cut it again. And guess what? It's still stuck. So cut it a third time. You'll do much better than me. And finally, I think I've got it. Yes, there we go. And look at that. It's not spreading out at all. Really nice and neat. You can work with it. Now I'm using corn syrup again on top of the cake layer. Dabbing it again, and this will help the caramel to adhere to the cake, stay in place. Now we melt more of our chocolate. Oh, sorry, putting the caramel on. I'm skipping a step. Placing our caramel layer on top. Now, here comes the chocolate. Getting ahead of myself. I couldn't wait for the chocolate. So we have a total of 900 grams of chocolate that I used. And so we melt it with some cream to make sure it's pourable. You don't want to add too much cream because it won't harden very well. It'll stay soft too long. But you want enough so you can really pour it. It doesn't just sit there as a kind of a hard blob on top. So you just have to experiment and see what you think works best. It's not the end of the world if it isn't spreadable enough. You can kind of use a palette knife or a regular knife and spread it out. It doesn't matter that much how this looks because you'll be adding more chocolate on top. So we get this basic shape done, and then we'll put that in the fridge for 20 minutes, and that firms it up. And I'm putting it on, I'm doing this on it's a cooling rack, but it allows all the extra chocolate to drip through. Now drizzling on more chocolate. Now this is to give the look of a Twix bar. When you look at a Twix bar, it has these lines that go all across it. Now a little hint here, and Yolanda warns about this, and I didn't pay any mind to it, and I should have. So this looks great, looks really good. These should be much thicker. So when you're doing it, cut off more of the end. You can put it in a piping bag. You don't have to use a bottle. But they should be a lot thicker because when you put the next layer of chocolate over it, you won't really see the lines very much if they're as thin as this. And the warm chocolate will almost will melt those lines. So this is all right. The consistency of the chocolate is actually really quite nice. Look at that pouring. That's beautiful. But my second bar was actually better. It had thicker. I thought it wasn't as good because I did it first and it came out much thicker. And I thought this one was better, and it turns out I was wrong. It was better. You can still see the lines. You can see them. And there we are. Giant Twix cake. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to check out our show Baking for Change on cable channels across Canada this fall.